Morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm really pleased to welcome Josh Shapiro to the Erie area. He serves as Pennsylvania's Attorney General to combat crime, uphold individual rights, and protect consumers. He's the sixth person elected to the office and was sworn in January 17, 2017, as the Commonwealth's top lawyer and chief law enforcement officer with a mandate to ensure integrity and be the people's Attorney General. Throughout his career as a public servant, Josh has risen from above politics and taken on the status quo to protect Pennsylvanians. Some of his top priorities include protecting seniors, veterans, small businesses, and consumers from scams and frauds, implementing a comprehensive integrity strategy to ensure people from across the Commonwealth are heard and have the faith in the criminal justice system, and directing an aggressive fight against heroin and the opioid epidemic, including treatment for those suffering from addiction. Josh's work has earned him a national reputation as a rising progressive leader and bipartisan consensus builder. As the chairman of the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, his work on behalf of victims and for criminal justice reform earned him the trust of law enforcement leaders from across the ideological spectrum. As chairman of the Montgomery County Board of Commissioners, Josh led a historic fiscal turnaround, helped the first LGBT couples in Pennsylvania to marry, protected voting rights, and fired Wall Street money managers to protect pensions and save retirees millions of dollars. As state representative for Pennsylvania's 153rd House District, he passed some of the toughest ethics laws in state history. Josh Shapiro graduated magna cum laude from the University of Rochester and earned his law degree from Georgetown University Law Center. He was in private practice for over a decade and is a member of the Pennsylvania Bar. Josh was raised in Montgomery County, where he met his high school sweetheart, Lori, and where they are raising their 4 children. Please join me in welcoming Josh Shapiro to Erie. Josh.
Great to have you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for that kind introduction. I appreciate that very much, and it is great to be back in Erie. And I just want to salute you and County Executive Kathy Dahlkemper for your exemplary leadership. I know we partner together on many things. Kathy and I spoke quite a bit about the UPMC Highmark matter, and she was a great leader on that. We're glad that could be resolved, and so I'm grateful to be here with you. I'm also very grateful to be here with Jack Denieri, your district attorney, who you will hear from in a bit. We partner on a number of issues to try and keep the good people of Erie County safe. We are pleased to be joined by Special Agent Don Robinson, who oversees the ATF for the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Don's been a tremendous partner in combating gun violence across the Commonwealth, and we'll look forward to hearing from him. And I have 2 members of my senior team, my Executive Deputy Attorney General, Jennifer Selber, and our Chief Deputy Attorney General, Brendan O'Malley, who is with us and hiding in the back. I'm here today because gun violence is an epidemic that is claiming the lives of 1,500 Pennsylvanians each and every year, 1,500. It touches all of us, from daily shootings in our cities and towns to rising suicides in communities across the Commonwealth. I am keenly aware that any conversation about guns causes people to go to their corners and tune out. But what I'm here today to talk about is not something that's going to cause people to pick sides or weigh in with their ideology. It's simply about following the law in order to keep people safe. Following the law to keep people safe. As Attorney General, it is my responsibility to use my authority to fight back against this public health epidemic, which clearly knows no county borders. And so that's why I'm here in Erie today to launch the Office of Attorney General's Track and Trace initiative, a smart, data-driven approach to decreasing gun trafficking in Pennsylvania, to decrease illegal transfers, and to take crime guns out of neighborhoods across Pennsylvania. We read a headline seemingly every few days about a mass shooting. And then, of course, we listen to these talking heads go and analyze the motives and try and figure out where a shooter went wrong. But we hear so little in our public discourse, in our daily discourse, about everyday gun violence plaguing Pennsylvania, from here in Erie to State College to Norristown, Pennsylvania. And of course, we hear a lot about laws that need to change, the reforms that Harrisburg and Washington need to get done to make us safe. But we hear so very little about the laws we already have on the books and whether they're being followed or enforced. Gun violence in Pennsylvania, no matter where you stand or sit on this issue, is a crisis. 1,500 Pennsylvanians die each and every year from guns. 520 of them are homicides, and a whopping 940 of them are suicides. 62% of those gun deaths in Pennsylvania each year are suicides. Here in Erie County, the rate of firearm deaths is 30% higher than the state average. I'm committed to protecting the right of a parent who wants to legally own a gun to protect their home. But I'm also committed to protecting the right of a parent who wants to walk their child to school and not be in fear of getting shot on the street on their way. Pennsylvania simply cannot and should not endure this carnage. And we need an all-hands-on-deck approach to enforce the laws on the books and address the systematic and systemic issues that are fueling this crisis. So I fundamentally believe that law enforcement's mission cannot end with solving an individual gun crime. So it's not enough just to confiscate a gun from a crime scene and lock it away somewhere. We must trace the history of that gun to determine how it ended up in the hand of that criminal. A trace, and this is important, which is required under Pennsylvania law, shows us who first bought the gun and where they bought it from. It gives law enforcement an incredible amount of intelligence to assist us in our investigations. So this might reveal additional crimes that took place and uncover additional criminals who played a role in this gun's journey. And it could lead us to troves of other illegal guns that are out on the streets in our neighborhoods and trafficked throughout the Commonwealth. We know that crime guns recovered by police typically change hands multiple times after its first legal retail sale. Every serial number on a gun tells a story, and we are committed to finding out where these stories begin and hold people committing gun crimes accountable. And so that is exactly why I'm back here in Erie today to announce Track and Trace and what it is designed to accomplish. The initiatives focus specifically on the responsibilities of 4 constituencies: law enforcement, gun retailers, consumers, and finally gun owners. The first step focuses on law enforcement's responsibility to collaborate and to enforce our existing laws and trace every gun. Pennsylvania law requires law enforcement to identify a firearms source with tracing information from the ATF, yet most crime guns, are actually not submitted to this shared law enforcement database. And because this information is not shared, we actually have no idea how many crime guns were recovered in Pennsylvania last year. And that makes us all less safe. I acknowledge, and by the way, you should know, we are one of the few states in the nation with this law, yet we're not using it effectively to make Pennsylvanians safer. And by the way, I acknowledge that my office didn't always do this. In fact, when I first took over as Attorney General a bit more than 2 years ago, we weren't tracing our guns. But because we made this intelligence a top priority, we are now seeing the results by putting this data as required by law into the database. And now we want to work with other law enforcement across Pennsylvania to make sure that they do the same. Today, only about a third of our 1,200 law enforcement agencies actually input crime guns into the database as required by law, and then even less share the intelligence that's contained in that database. My office is committed to starting the conversations and visiting local police departments across our state to elevate the importance of this data entry and providing resources to uphold the laws on the books. The tracing of crime guns gives law enforcement a bird's eye view as to how these guns travel, how a gun is stolen from a hunting cabin in northwest Pennsylvania and ends up in a drug bust on the streets of Philadelphia. So let me give you a real life example of how tracing can work. Back in April, Huntington County Police seized a semi-automatic handgun from a woman named Tiffany Williamson during a routine traffic stop. They traced the gun and determined that a man named Aaron Daniels had previously been in possession of it. Daniels had a previous felony conviction and therefore was not legally permitted to possess a firearm. In fact, we had information that the gun was going to be used in a shooting before police and our agents actually took it off the streets. Local police alerted my office to this firearm seizure, and our agents arrested Williamson and sent the handgun to the FBI for forensic analysis and fingerprints. The results showed that Daniels' DNA was also present on the handgun, and Daniels was subsequently arrested and charged for firearm offensive. Thanks to the collaboration and the swift work of those who tracked the history of the gun, we were able to bring 2 individuals to justice and take an illegal gun out of our community, take a crime gun out of our community. This is a prime example of why track and trace is so important. We don't know what additional crimes may have occurred if law enforcement hadn't done their part and traced that gun. And remember, a small number of guns in Pennsylvania are used in a large number of crimes in Pennsylvania, making this tracing initiative, following the law, even more important. So every crime gun recovered, whether at a drug bust or a crime scene, must be entered into the E-Trace database. ATF is the premier expert on tracing and data. And I couldn't be more grateful to Don Robinson and the good people, good men and women at the ATF, not just for their presence here today, but for their commitment to track and trace and their commitment to working collaboratively to get this done and make Pennsylvania safer. And we know that we can't do this alone. So that's why my office will form the Track and Trace Working Group, a top-tier collaborative partnership with federal, state, and local law enforcement that will identify trends and build a first-of-its-kind action-based investigative arm targeting illegal gun trafficking. The mission? Well, it's to foster input, support analysis, and use the information we are all receiving to stop gun trafficking here in the Commonwealth. Currently, the ATF, multiple district attorneys from across the Commonwealth, the Pittsburgh Police Department, and the Philadelphia Police Department have committed to joining this working group, and we are outreaching to other agencies before we officially convene. This group will meet regularly to share information, analysis, and discuss gun trends that we are seeing across the Commonwealth. I want to tell you how grateful I am to the Erie Police Department for already stepping up and agreeing to join this initiative to trace crime guns found right here in Erie. We also applaud and support the work of the Erie County Gun Working Group that works across jurisdictions with local, state, and federal partners to combat gun violence and illegal gun possession. The second step of this initiative is to work with gun retailers to modernize their systems as they follow Pennsylvania law governing firearm sales. You see, Pennsylvania law requires retailers to submit a record of every firearm sale to the state police. Most retailers today use a paper record that then gets mailed to the state police and has to be entered into the computer manually. This adds time, it creates a backlog, and ultimately what it does for law enforcement is it holds up our investigations. Our systems of paper record of sale are outdated and create this unnecessary backlog. It inhibits the ability of law enforcement to quickly trace guns recovered at crime scenes, to determine where they were purchased and who purchased them. So my office will work with gun retailers across the state to increase the use of PSP's electronic record of sale system, a modern and smart tool that will allow law enforcement to quickly trace guns found at crime scenes or in the hands of criminals. And I ask you to stay tuned because tomorrow we will have a major announcement in this area involving a significant retailer in Pennsylvania. The third step of this plan is working with consumers who also have a responsibility to prevent gun trafficking. They must understand the consequences of straw purchases when one individual buys a firearm for another individual who is unable to purchase a gun legally and then illegally transfers it. Every gun starts out as legal. An illegal transfer to a prohibited purchaser or a criminal is a violation of our laws. And these are serious crimes with serious consequences. Look, we all know that you can't go into a store and buy a six-pack of beer for an underage kid outside a local beer distributor here. But too few people know that buying a gun for a felon or a prohibited purchaser is a crime. And understand that under state law, 2 straw purchase guns comes with a 5-year mandatory sentence. So we will deploy our assets and engage citizens across our Commonwealth, educating them on these illegalities and the dangers of participating in this type of behavior. Just a few weeks ago, my office's Gun Violence Task Force arrested 2 men for straw purchases. One defendant purchased 2 guns for the second defendant who had previously been convicted of gun offenses and therefore couldn't purchase firearms legally. Agents recovered both handguns from the second defendant. The guns were loaded, and one was found on the floor under the bed, within reach of 2 small children who were at the residence at the time of the search. If you aren't able to purchase a gun legally for yourself, there is a reason for that, and there are laws that prevent that. Prohibited purchasers have criminal backgrounds, could have a protection from abuse order against them, or could have severe mental health issues. Our existing laws are in place for a reason, to prevent their gun possession. And so that's why my Office of Public Engagement, working with other advocacy groups, will launch a consumer education program about the dangers of straw purchases. And so when consumers are armed with this life-saving knowledge, we will decrease the risk of disaster striking. Finally, the fourth step of this plan is to call on responsible gun owners to protect their firearms from theft and from misuse. Pennsylvania has a rich tradition of gun ownership and sportsmanship, and I'm committed to protecting people's Second Amendment rights. But we need the public's help to ensure that guns are handled appropriately. Household guns that are not safely stored or left unlocked greatly increase the risk of suicide, of unintentional shootings, and of theft. And suicide is on the rise, as we know, in part due to the lack of safe storage. More than 4.5 million American children live in a home with access to unlocked, loaded guns. One result, 80% of child firearm suicides involve a family member's gun. Of all the deaths in Pennsylvania due to firearms, nearly two-thirds were suicides. This is especially a problem in rural Pennsylvania. A gun in the home increases the risk of suicide by firearm by a factor of 17. Gun theft is also prevalent. Stolen guns jumped 60% between 2000 and 2016. Prohibited purchasers are known to target gun owners for theft, hoping their guns aren't stored safely. This is dangerous, and we need responsible people here in Erie and all across Pennsylvania to join us and make sure that their guns are stored safely in their home. Look, the Track and Trace program is an expansion of the Office of Attorney General's existing efforts to combat crime guns across Pennsylvania. Through our Gun Violence Task Force in Philadelphia, we've worked with the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, Police Department to investigate gun trafficking and straw purchases. But understand that our Bureau of Narcotics Investigations, which operates all across the Commonwealth, has actually recovered 250 guns annually, illegal crime guns, during drug busts involving heroin and fentanyl and meth and other drugs plaguing our community. Where you see illegal drugs, you tend to also find crime guns. And so with the help of the ATF, we have traced every single gun recovered in my administration back to the moment that it was purchased. And now, with the launch of Track and Trace, we are taking the great successes of our efforts and expanding them to a first-of-its-kind, collaborative, statewide initiative that will save lives. I'm proud that these many law enforcement entities could come together to participate in this historic program, and I'm especially proud that we were able to announce it here in Erie today. Here's why these efforts are so important. If tracing crime guns can prevent a mom from having to bury her child, one person from buying a gun on behalf of a criminal, or assist one agency in figuring out how guns in the community are ending up in the hands of criminals, then we have made real progress. The kind of progress that Pennsylvanians demand of us in law enforcement, to work together to address this public health and public safety crisis. It's now my pleasure to introduce Special Agent Don Robinson from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives. Don is a friend. Don is a tremendous law enforcement leader. And the fact that Don took his time to be here in Erie today hopefully lets you know how important this community is to him and to ATF. And I know how important that partnership is to the Office of Attorney General. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
As the Attorney General said, my name is Don Robinson. I'm the Special Agent in charge for ATF for the Philadelphia Field Division, which covers the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I'm very happy to be here and really to continue our partnership with the AG and all of our law enforcement partners at the state and local level. As our former director used to always say, our gun mission, our firearms mission at ATF really focuses in on two things, and that is traffickers and trigger pullers. And they play, they're really tight together because obviously most of the violent crime that occurs is committed by a small percentage of the offenders out there. And the ability of those folks to get firearms is really what feeds that cycle of violence. So when we say we target traffickers and trigger pullers, we're talking about the people that put those guns in the hands of those violent folks. We're talking, all of this is about crime guns. This is not a registration of firearms. This is crime guns that have been recovered in criminal investigations, on search warrants, across the state, across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Last year, I believe ATF traced about 12,500 firearms, crime guns in the state of Pennsylvania. Here in Erie, in the county, it's about 230, almost 300 in the county. So what we want to do is build on that success. Tracing of these firearms, as the Attorney General said, brings us back to that first retail purchaser, which are very valuable investigative leads for all of us, ATF, the AG's office, state police, local police. It provides us that initial information where we can go to find out where that gun started and move on from there. Another important piece that I think really plays well with the track and trace with the state here is the NIBIN program that ATF runs, National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. So NIBIN, when a crime gun is seized on the street, it goes to it goes through the police department, it goes to a lab. Most of the labs, the Pennsylvania State Police lab here and the local labs in Philly and the county down in Pittsburgh have electronic access to E-Trace, so those guns are automatically traced. And also goes into, it's test fired and rounds go into NIBIN. And what NIBIN does is takes a very high quality digital photograph of test fires, of the shell casings from test fires, and it compares them to a national database. And what that allows us to do is tie that gun that was used in a criminal incident, say here in Erie, to see if it was linked to any other incidents across the state and across the country. That tracing, the NIBIN work, and tracking of those crime guns is really important to be able to piece these things together. We've seen previously unknown trafficking patterns, I would say, due to the tracing and the NIBIN work that's being done. So the state police labs that are across the state here are on NIBIN. There's one in Allegheny County, Philadelphia Police Department has one. And it's really an important network that plays along, I think, well with this track and trace initiative. We just did a seminar yesterday in the area with the partnership with the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which targeted federal firearms licensees. And we talked a lot in that about securing firearms. That's an important thing. A lot of firearms, crime guns that turn up, have been stolen in burglaries, robberies from licensees' premises, and also, as the AG mentioned, unsecured firearms in vehicles and homes. It really is a plea to the public to make sure that they're securing their firearms, because a lot of those guns that are stolen turn up in the hands of the folks that can't get these weapons legally. So I'm very happy to be participating in this partnership. All of our offices across the state, the two here out in Pittsburgh, Harrisburg, Reading, in Philadelphia, are all working very closely with our partners at the AG's office, the state police, and each of the local police departments to make sure that we're all working together and kind of swimming in the same direction. So I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for having me.
Jack? I think Kathy Dahlkemper, our great county executive, is going to deliver some remarks. And I think it's important to note, as I said before, it's a public health crisis, it's a public safety crisis. We need all hands on deck. And County Executive Dahlkemper has leveraged the resources of Erie County to assist in this initiative, and we're pleased to have her here today.
Thank you, Attorney General. It's so great to have you here, and this is such an important announcement, and thank you for coming to Erie County for this announcement. This announcement and the work that's going to be done really addresses several county priorities. First, the safety and well-being of the people of Erie County is really of the utmost concern of county government. Gun violence affects all of our communities throughout the county in many different ways, as was mentioned. And even beyond what we see in the news, through police and through the courts, the suicide rates, as we know, are up, and just the domestic violence that happens. Gun violence is truly a public health issue, and public health is a true concern of county government. And as we know, it's also a public safety issue. It puts our children at risk, which is also a huge priority for our government. I have a small chair in my office. I always say who I'm working for is that next generation. What's happening here today is going to help our children and help that future generation to have a safer future. And what's also appealing about Attorney General's approach is that it's both data-driven and collaborative. Again, much of the work that we do in county government is working with our other government agencies as well as our nonprofits and for-profits. And this type of work, when the state, the federal, and local can come together collaboratively, is really when we can make a huge difference. From our work here in county government, we know that this is the most effective way to get the work done, by using that hard data and by doing a collaborative effort that's not based on emotion or reaction, but based on that data. And that's how we will get results. And the Attorney General is also building partnerships and bringing together our law enforcement and organizations from all levels in order to truly maximize the results. So here in Erie County, we know from our own experiences that we get much further along when we use our collective resources to create something larger. We know that bringing a community to change takes that coordinated effort and getting all involved, and that's what this initiative is really all about. So I commend the Attorney General and his staff for the work that they are doing today and the work that they will continue to do, and I commend all of those in Erie County who are assisting and associating with this effort. So thank you again for being here and bringing forward this very, very important effort for our community and for the Commonwealth as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I want to bring up one of our other partners, an important partner, Jack Denieri, your Erie County District Attorney, someone we've had the opportunity to work together on a number of initiatives. And as I said before, I'm pleased to be here in Erie County to launch this initiative together with him, knowing that we've got collaboration within law enforcement, and we appreciate his partnership. Thank you. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Josh. I, too, am very honored to have the Attorney General and ATF here, I think the word is serendipity or serendipitous, because tomorrow the district attorney's office is submitting a $250,000 grant proposal to the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, injecting new life into the gun working group, which the Attorney General mentioned before, that our office formed a few years ago for a brief period of time, had success with it in terms of getting guns off the street, and now there's an opportunity for us, and it fits within the work that the District Attorney's Office and all of law enforcement in Erie County has been doing. So it's quite timely that not only are we here, is the Attorney General here for guns, but a new initiative, yet another tool in the toolbox, as they say, in terms of how we can make Erie County safer. So I thank you, and I will note too, ATF and the Attorney General's office, one of the two letters I received, as well as Erie Police, as well as Mill Creek Police, because when you submit these grants, you have to have letters of support from other law enforcement agencies, and so no real hesitation on these agencies sending the letter forward so we can attach to our submission. If you heard the Attorney General and Don from the ATF speak, they mentioned a couple of key phrases. A small number of guns commit a disproportionately large number of the violent crimes in Pennsylvania. And where have we heard that before? We heard that before as Unified Erie took off here in Erie County with great collaboration from all our law enforcement partners, because data showed that a small number of individuals in any community commit a disproportionately large amount of the crime. So once again, we know that message rings true, and so that's why track and trace is going to be successful. That's why the enforcement provision of Unified Erie, the three-pronged gun violence reduction initiative, that's why that was successful, because it was data-driven, as is track and trace. Because when you follow the data, you will get results, and that's exactly what we anticipate that is going to happen here. So I commend the Attorney General's office and ATF and all the other law enforcement in Erie County for recognizing, we all recognize that you have to work smarter, and that's what all these initiatives now are doing. We're working together, but we're also working smarter together. It's not simply a bunch of meetings that we go to, it's that we share that intel, and that's what's important, and that's what gets results. So I couldn't be happier that we're going to have all the support of law enforcement, and with this initiative, I'm confident that once again we are going to see results. We're going to see what's known as deliverables. Very important. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. You can clap for the DA. That's fine. Don, they didn't clap for us, but they clapped for the DA. It's all right. There you go. There you go. Look, the DA spoke correctly about collaboration and smart policing. But we know that at the beginning of this, in order to get that data in there, you need committed police chiefs. You need committed municipalities across Pennsylvania to put this information in. And so, Chief, I want to invite you up to close our program here to talk about the commitment you've made in the city of Erie to putting this data in and saving lives. So we're pleased to have you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Okay. I want to go back a few years, over 10 years ago, the old Lieutenant Dan days when I ran the major crime unit. And members of the ATF came to Erie and said, we have this new program called E-Trace. And I can tell you then that we went all in. Every weapon that the city of Erie has recovered in over the past 10 years has gone into that E-Trace system. We've put our guns into the state police NIBIN system, and we are committed to that. I know that being the major crime supervisor, I was sending detectives out once a month because somebody was shot in Erie. And over a few years, that number kept growing and growing till we were sending them out over once a week. We went from 12 to over 60 in a short period of time. Gun violence in Erie got horrific. And it was members of Erie United that came together and started the program to help us. And it was very data driven. It got to the roots of the problem, and that's how we did it. Please, I want to make sure I recognize that Chief Scott Height from Mill Creek is here, and also Chief Paul Markowitz from Juvenile Probation. Our agencies, along with the people here, have worked closely together. I'll tell you a quick story. Just a few weeks ago, you read in the paper that there was an arrest made. ATF agent Joe Price, who's in here somewhere, contacted our department about 4 o'clock and said, hey, we got a tip that this store had called and said somebody came in to purchase a gun and they were ineligible, so it was denied. And the next day, somebody else came in. They tried to buy the same exact gun and they were turned down. A third person came in later that night and bought the gun. But then one of the employees said, you know what? I think the guy in the parking lot was with all three of these people. And they called the ATF, and with our detectives and the ATF agents, search warrant was obtained on a house in Erie. The gun was recovered, and the individual was charged by the ATF. And that's all exactly what we're talking about, is following it from start to finish in solving the gun crimes. And by doing this, we're going to make the community much safer. So I'm very happy that this is going to go across the state, and knowing that we've been at the forefront of making sure this gets done properly. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chief. Glad you clapped for the chief. Look, I'm happy to take any questions. And again, I just want to thank the good people of Erie for their leadership on this issue. This is where we wanted to be today, to launch Track and Trace. We've got a lot more to come and a lot of work to do, but we're committed to doing it together. So again, I want to thank the ATF. I want to thank our local officials. I want to thank our state officials. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions from the media.
Why did you choose to announce this initiative here in Erie County today?
I think Erie represents an area that is plagued with gun violence, where gun violence is undermining our quality of life here, and where we have a group of elected officials and a group of community leaders who are really committed to working together to do something about it. And it's my job to enforce the laws. It's also my job to see where we have gaps in that effort and try to fill that. And so right now, we know that if we've got a committed group of people already here, and we can get this information in these databases and follow our law, and use Erie as an example to other communities across Pennsylvania, then I think we can scale up the good work that's being done here in ways that strengthen communities all across our Commonwealth. And so I wanted to be here today in part because I want to salute the good work they've done, and in part, I want to use them as the impetus to bring others along across Pennsylvania. Anything else?
This might be a question more for Don, but
Sure.
What about guns with obliterated serial numbers? What kind of challenges do those pose to track, and is there any way that law enforcement can track those weapons, those illegal weapons?
So there are ways to track those. The labs, each of the labs have personnel that are trained and able to raise their serial numbers through a number of processes we're not going to get into. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's ATF has a firearms and tool mark examiners course. It's 2 years long, and many of the examiners that you'll see across the state and across the country have been through that training. So it's not a stop. We are able to, in most cases, get those numbers back up and carry on the trace. Thanks, though. Good question.
Thank you.
Anything else? You good, Jackie?
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you all very much. Thank you.